Hi, everyone. I am Allison Miller, Managing Partner at Tiara International, and I am making this video to bring you a Tiara tool about well-being. A really important part of the Tiara leadership model, of the true leadership model, is understanding that a really vital part of you being able to show up and lead in a way where you are aligned with your values and what matters to you most, and to actually, in many ways, have the charisma that's required to lead effectively. It really matters that you are coming from a place of being well, of being emotionally well, physically well, as much as that is possible for you, relationally well, that there's a attention and care for the well-being of the human who's doing the leading. So there is always a version of us who showed up in any given moment, that shows up to work, that shows up in relationships, that shows up in how you drive your car, how you interact with people in public, the choices that you make in how you go about your day. And so this TR tool is about learning how to care for the version of you who showed up. And another way to think about the version of you who showed up is that in any given moment, you're in a particular condition as a human being. You're in a particular, set of thoughts. You have thinking patterns going on, emotions and sensations, moods, an experience of being in your physical body. There's a version of you, like maybe you're in kind of a peaceful, ready to get to work, feeling kind of relaxed version of you. That's always lovely when that happens. And in these lives that we live, where we've got so much going on, and oftentimes it feels like we have competing roles and responsibilities and more to do than we can fit reasonably into our day, it's easy to show up in a more stressed or rattled, dysregulated, overwhelmed, pressured, rushing, irritated, anxious, whatever the version is. It's very easy to show up in a version that isn't actually ideal to leading in the way that we want. And that's completely normal and part of being human. So the condition we're in is kind of like the internal weather pattern that is present. Some days it's sunny and the skies are blue, and sometimes it's hot and humid, and sometimes it's stormy, and sometimes it's cold and dry. We, just like the weather, are constantly changing, and what's going on inside of us and what's going on inside of us in relationship to what is going on outside of us is dynamic and constantly changing. So when you show up, for example, to a meeting, let's say you need to lead a meeting, it'd be really helpful if you had an awareness of what version of me is here right now. What condition do I find myself in right now? And given the version of me who has shown up and the task at hand, the meeting, if you're working on a project where you're writing something, you need to send a really important email, what version of you is present there who's actually engaging with others, doing whatever the work is, communicating in writing or in a meeting? What version of you is there when you go home and you cross through the front door into your home and you interact with people you live with? What version of you is present now? We have enormous power to be influential in the world in a way that we want if we become more conscious that we all have, in a sense, a continuum, like often many patterns, many different versions of us that show up. You could even name them if you wanted to. And there are times where we might be in, for example, in a more irritable state, where if we really get present to, wow, I'm irritable right now. Oh, you might be able to recognize that you're actually not ready for human interaction yet. You're not sort of fit for the quality of human interaction that you want, because there's too much irritability or dysregulation in the system. So the Terra tool for you, I'm going to share my screen and show it to you, and you can follow along. Now, as I go through this, please hit pause and take all the time that you need to write your answers. And I'm just going to keep going through it in the interest of time for this video. So the first question for you is, what version of me is present now? This is really a question for you that's an ongoing practice, because in order to take care of ourselves and support ourselves to lead, we have to actually know what version of me is present now. So if I find myself really stressed, rattled, feeling really overwhelmed, that's the condition I find myself in. That would be really good for me to know, because then I know who I'm dealing with and I can see, oh, that version of me is actually in need of care. But I'm more aware of the need to take care of my own well-being because I'm continually checking in with myself. What version of me is present now? So you can do it right now, just dropping your eyes inside, scanning to see, it's like getting quiet inside yourself. What version of me is present now? Welcoming, allowing. This is also connected to another really important aspect of the true leadership model at Tiara, is acceptance, that we actually create a space, a welcoming space, allowing ourselves to show up and be as we are in the moment, because it's constantly changing. And when we let go of judging ourselves and resisting the version of us who is present in the moment, when we can welcome it, then we can do something. If the version of us who is present isn't really compatible with relating or leading well, it's not capable of engaging with work in the way that you want to. Okay, well, that's data. There's no need for judgment, but clearly something is needed. Maybe we need an intention to support ourselves. Maybe we need a little bit of rest. Maybe we need a conversation with somebody. Maybe we need to take a walk outside, get some hot tea, do some deep breathing, scale back our goals for the next hour because we're just not in a state that's compatible with being productive, given the version of us who is present right now. So that's the first part of this tool, is something that's really for you to just practice right now. And I would encourage you to be practicing this ongoingly. It's a really important way to help yourself meet the moment as it unfolds, where you're aware of the condition that you're in, recognizing that, and then making choices based on what you find. Now, if we jump down to the second part here, it's also true that for many of us, there are different versions of us that often show up. And these are really common. There are many other versions, but I wanted to go with these three. One is that we often show up in some kind of a fear version. We're anxious, we're overwhelmed, we're frightened, we're dysregulated and rattled in some kind of way, where there's fear, worry, overthinking, excessive, the drive to like control things to try to avoid negative outcomes. And so I encourage you to take some time here to get familiar, if you can. If you're not present right now, you're not connected to being afraid, this would be something, if you can remember to do this at a time when you are afraid, to sit down and actually get present to what actually goes on with me when I'm afraid. What kinds of thoughts occur in my mind? What kinds of emotions do I experience? Body sensation. So for example, I often start doing a lot of what if thinking and also imagining worst case scenarios. Those are some of the thoughts that go on for me when I'm in fear. And I have this feeling of like stress and anxiety, sometimes real pressure. And then like I can feel tightness in my chest. Sometimes it's like a pit in my stomach and my muscles get really tight. And I start doing a lot of multitasking, switch tasking, working without a plan, losing contact with priorities. So my behavior starts to change. I rush. And so then it's a really helpful once you have a sense, and you can do this for not only the fear version, but also the angry version. The kinds of thoughts of like, I can't believe they said that. How dare they? It's not fair. Right? What kind of anger and heat and frustration and irritability and some rage, outrage. Also, when we're angry, we're also often very, very sad as well. What kind of emotions are present? What kind of sensations? The heat in the body, right? This this like drive to move, with shame. What kinds of thoughts are there about? For me, it's usually, sort of a sense of disgust, like I can't believe I said that, I behaved that way, I should have worked this out already. It's usually mean. And thoughts of sort of not enoughness, some kind of inadequacy. And how do I explain the emotions of shame? I mean, it is kind of like more of a sadness, and more in a movement of kind of depression and melancholy, and heavy for me in the body. Heavy-hearted, aching heart, and then, in my behaviors, I want to like hide, I want to overcompensate. I can move into sort of like a people-pleasing, fawning kind of energy. So this is just for me personally, but just take the time to get present to when you're the fear version of yourself, when you're the angry version of yourself, when you're the shame version of yourself. I hit pause on this video and just take some time to get present to what are the thoughts, what are the emotions, what are the sensations in your body, and what kind of behaviors show up. As much as you're aware of it now, and this is an exercise to come back to study yourself, get to know yourself, get to know the common versions of you that show up, and you, of course, can come up with your own versions besides these 3 labels. And then something that can be really helpful, and this is where we get into how this tool is about well-being, is we're becoming more intimate with the versions of us that show up that tend to interfere with us leading in the way that we truly want to, that of having the experience of being self-governing as a leader. And so it's good to check in. What is it that this version of me needs? When I'm afraid, what do I need? When I'm angry, what do I need? When I feel ashamed, what do I need? Dropping in, checking in with yourself, getting to know yourself. So only when we begin to recognize, wait a minute, what does this version of me need? How can I support, soothe, and care for this version of me? When we have an awareness of what we need, and even if you don't know what you need, it's still a useful question. How can I care for, soothe, and support this version of me that has shown up in the moment? This is how we really do take care of ourselves, is by noticing and observing, oh, this is the me who's here right now. This version of me is in some kind of a struggle, is having some kind of difficulty. All right, well, what do I need? How can I care for myself? Then you, by focusing in on yourself and this kind of open, accepting awareness that you're not always going to show up as a version of you that you're delighted by, that you're going to show up in more of the shadow version of yourself, like all human beings, and that you and those versions of you are worthy of your care. They're worthy of you taking care of you. That's you getting the hands on the levers of being able to take care of your own well-being in a very deep way and an immediate way around what it is that you actually need. So I hope you'll take some time to fill out this Tiara tool. Feel free to come back to it repeatedly. And when you conclude the exercise, or at any point, just take a moment to think about, like, what's the wisdom you want to remember? What's the mantra? What's the statement? Like, for me, I think it's really important for me to settle, then act. Settle myself, because it doesn't matter if it's the fear, anger, or shame version. When I have it be a priority of, like, I'm settling myself in, like I'm caring for myself, then those versions of me, while they might be present, they're much less likely to take the reins and take control of how I lead, because I'm actively soothing those parts of me that are activated. So take some time to think about, what's the wisdom that you want to remember, you want to be guided by, how can you care for, soothe, and support any version of you that shows up in the present moment that could interfere with you being the kind of leader that you consciously want to be in your life. All right. Thank you so much. I hope you found this tool helpful, and I'll see you next time.